Right, we're back live with you tonight on In Focus, and thanks for staying on. The government is racing against time to save the South African Post Office from liquidation. Communications Minister Mondli Gungubele recently informed Parliament that millions of South Africans and hundreds of businesses will be negatively impacted if the Post Office was to close down. The ailing state-owned entity is under provisional liquidation since February following a High Court order. The Minister joins us now to outline more of the plans to save this entity. Minister, good evening, good to have you, and thank you very much for making the time.
Good evening to you, Chavo. Good evening to your viewership, and thanks for the opportunity.
Earlier in your term, you said that you want to handle this matter of the post office in a commercially advisable way. Now, yesterday in Parliament, you said that the best option the South African Post Office can take right now is to be put under business rescue. Why? I mean, you had one option of a private consortium that could buy 60% of the business and keep you at 40%. You don't have to bail it out. They'll run it and they'll take care of it, and it will still fulfill its commercial and developmental mandates. And of course, you've got the liquidation because the creditors want, I don't know whether is it 9.3 billion, but certainly in September, the DDG reported 8.2 billion of liabilities, 3.2 owed to the post office and 5 billion to the other creditors. Why is business rescue the best option?
Listen, thanks, Tabo. We are at a point where the post office finds itself struggling to service its cost, which, if we refer to them as liability, are 8 billion or more against the revenue of 2+ billion this year, which means it's an unaffordable cost service, and that puts the creditors in a state of discomfort, and that also threatens the no less than 700 SMEs. That also puts under threat the issue of 6.9 million grant beneficiaries, and a number of other services that are postal in nature to the far-flung areas and so on. It's our view that the state has to do its best to take responsibility to service people in this sector, in particular the historically disadvantaged area, and of course try its best to align to the modern way of doing business.
The 8 billion or so, does it include the money that is owed to, for example, the pension funds of workers that has not been paid, the medical aid arrears of workers that have not been paid, the salary increases that were promised and not implemented?
The creditors, which are more than 100, Tabo, are categorized into trade creditors and statutory obligation creditors. Those which you have already listed as statutory obligation creditors are your SARS, pension fund, and so on. So those are type of creditors. Now, as we have said several times since the provisional liquidation was granted by court, we said we're exploring options, and we reached a point where, having explored a lot of options, sat with a senior legal advice and tabled all our facts before the senior legal counsel, and of course with various experts, and we were able to realize that liquidating the SAPO is neither to the advantage of creditors and worse to SMMEs that are no less than 700, and of course the 6.9 social grants and the other services. Therefore, the business rescue, which is a process which is guarded by, which is under the legal, which exists based on the legal order, and of course ran by independent experts, working together with us to look at all the options. In order for the rescue, for the business rescue to be granted by court, we have to do three things. One, to answer the following questions. How are we going to keep the post office operational whilst the sustainable options are being explored? Secondly, how much equitable minimum we can give to creditors? And thirdly, is there a turnaround strategy? And based on that at face value, the court then, we hope, will be able to grant us that opportunity of putting the business under business rescue.
Now, let's look at that. I mean, it said at some point you were asking for 2.4 billion rands of a bailout from Treasury. Others are saying, but behind closed doors, you were actually asking for 9.3 billion. Which one is it?
No, I don't know that. We are saying, Thabo, if we were to, we said there are various options. One option is to pay out the 9 billion that is owed, which is 8 something billion, which is rounded, could be 9 billion. And then the fiscals can't afford that. And then the other one is to allow the business support to be liquidated, and the implications I've already spoken about. That's the reason we're opting for the business rescue. So there's no secret about anything. All we're saying is that it's either we pay the creditors 9 billion, and we say the fiscals can't afford that at the moment. That's why we're running these other options.
Yeah. Now, what are the creditors going to get, considering the fact that I know you're saying the post office has been losing at least 2 billion in the last 3 years? One would say the post office has been running at a constant loss for the past 15 years, actually.
In terms of the proposals, I'm very careful to go to the merits table, because our lawyers still have to argue them in July before court. But I can say, because that's a public information now, that the analysis we have made is that if the business were to be liquidated, the creditors would be worse off. In other words, the funded figures is about roughly 3 cents around 3 cents per rand. And we are arguing that in terms of the other options, the view is, if we're to go for a business rescue, 8 cents is what they could actually get as we pursue the rescue until the business stabilizes. Let me put this way on the 2.4 billion. You will remember, before we found ourselves in this situation, the post office was already on course towards turning itself around and using under the term post office of tomorrow. Already we were in this crisis of these liabilities at that stage. Then at that point, the cabinet was impressed with that strategy, and the cabinet committed 2.4 billion to fund that strategy. Now, because now we're in this situation, that 2.4 billion finds itself having to fund the business rescue process, and our analysis, there's a need to add another plus 3 something billion. So together, it's the funding that the government has to give in order for the court to consider business rescue.
Yeah. And are you getting that commitment of an additional 3.7 billion from Treasury?
The cabinet has actually agreed to fund that, because that's the only way we could go to court.
And how is that going to be used? I mean, let's talk about this brilliant plan of the post office of tomorrow. What does it look like? I mean, there are a couple of maybe let's just start here. In terms of staff component, it says you need to cut 40% of your employees. Close to 7,000 jobs, others are saying, are going to be lost. Is that the only way this could work?
I guess the methods, the modernization of the SAPRO is going to determine the number of workers you are going to require. Remember, the post office, whilst it creates jobs for workers who get employed by it, its primary servants are the hundreds of thousands of South Africans who need to get that service. I've already spoken about 6.9 million social grants, and also thousands of those who are employed by these 700 what to call SMMAs. So we need to make it a viable business. For it to be able to retain a certain number of workers, it must be a viable business. That's why there is a modernization. There are going to be elements of digitization. There's a number of pillars that it is being actually going to be run across to make sure that it is able to be a competitive, competitive business at an affordable way by ordinary people.
Yeah. Okay. Why are you blue ticking the workers? The communications workers union saying you have not spoken to them, even though they are believing maybe you will at some point give them a hearing. But so far you have not involved them in this plan and the work that you've been doing.
Listen, that is one of the issues, Thabo, I raised, but I was given an answer which I was comfortable with by the management of the post office that these thousands workers is not something new. The management already have been in negotiations in trying to reorganize the post office. And one of the outcomes was a need to deal with the thousands of these workers. Let me remind you something which you might not be aware of. One of the mistakes that, one of the problems that made it difficult to service the cost of post office, which is now 70, that cost is about 70% staff cost. Post office, for whatever reason, decided to absorb permanently workers who are no less than 8,000. And those, before they were absorbed, in our view, there was a pressure which was occurring from workers, and they absorbed no less than 8,000 workers for whom no work study was done. In other words, what were they going to do? So naturally, if you talk about reorganizing post office, logic tells you that you need to attend to that part.
So you are saying there's some redundancy within the system where people were absorbed without them having actual work. I mean, the union are disputing that. They are saying actually you need more because the reason why certain post office branches are closing, one, it's because of the business model that is archaic. For example, you need to upgrade the systems, you need to go digital. But two, it's because you don't have enough staff to carry out the work and do the services that are required there, particularly in the most rural parts of the country.
Listen, Thabo, the biggest challenge of the post office now is to compete with the businesses of similar kind. For instance, we need to compete in terms of time it takes the courier from Polokwane to Janfes in Polokwane, from Polokwane or from Mobo to East London. We need to compete with those. We need to make sure that we are a preferred service, in particular by those who are poor. So for that to happen, it means we need to be modernized, digitized, and also in terms of logistics, reorganized in a manner that makes us affordable and at the same time effective.
But has the trade not already bolted on that? You are coming into a space and competing with businesses that are fully entrenched in this digital space that are existing now. The post office existed then and still wants to do work of delivering the post in the way that they used to then. I mean, these businesses now, for example, no longer need an envelope and a stamp and an address. You can even put it on your phone. It's all digitized.
Listen, Thabo, we are intervening in many ways in terms of the poor people. as I speak now with you now, post office, they're still doing business. It's still dealing with the transportation of medicine, and it's still dealing with licensing. I can list a number of other things that the post office is doing. All what we need to do now is to be reorganized and be a viable business, so that we can claw back a number of services which are better affordable when they are given by post office to the poor people, and which are more accessible. Yeah.
Minister, by all means, let me give a particular example. For example, you're saying online motor vehicle license renewal bookings, right, at the post office. Why would I go to the post office when I can do that now at a retail store? I can buy my milk, buy my bread, and renew my license and go home. Why would I want to go to the post office?
Those services, Thabo, it's not about physically going to the post office. It's about the post office providing different user-friendly services online as a post office in a more affordable, what you call, way. It's not just about you coming to the post to a particular station all the time. Post office is committed to continue to actually move in line with the advancing and evolving technologies in as far as that issue is concerned. The key thing is that we want to be present in that space, so that the more we are present in the government, it is the better the supply of those services and the lesser the cost of those services.
So are you saying in particular instances, the post office of the future will no longer be a bricks and mortar building, but maybe a post office that exists in a cloud somewhere?
That's one of the major ways in which the post is going to exist, but there will still be physical transportation of courier, what to call parcels and other things.
And how much of this is going to be reliant on having a bank?
Can you repeat that?
How much of your strategy, turnaround strategy, is going to be reliant on having a bank, a post bank?
Post bank is being separated completely from the post office to be a fully fledged bank. Remember, our studies have demonstrated that thousands of our people and small businesses do not have access to the current banks as we speak now. And we have been able to see a niche for a state bank to be able to actually accommodate those. So as we speak with now, the legislation is in process to completely cut this post bank from the post office.
And how are you going to make money without that? I mean, there are some who've been running the business and said if it doesn't include the bank, in fact, others are even saying that's probably part of the reason why Mark Barnes left, because you wanted him to run the post office without the bank, and he didn't quite agree to that strategy because he didn't see it as a viable way of running the post office.
The post office of tomorrow has proposed many approaches and there are many ways and interventions that are going to make it a viable business. Cutting costs and then cutting costs, improving the cost of actually using our services. And it is organized in such a manner, Thabo, that it is able to actually stand on its own. And when you come to Mark Barnes, I said to Xoli Mngami the other day, I wish Xoli can call Mark Barnes, and Mark Barnes 16-17 to 18-19, those are 3-year budgets. He was given no less than 7 billion as a bailout. I do not want to question his capability, as he actually says he has them. All what we want Mark Barnes to do is to actually brief South Africans what happened to that 7 billion. How did he use it?
We take a break.
The point I'm trying to make is that I think it is fair on our side to expect that a supposedly astute businessman like him would have used that 7 billion differently. Remember the strike that the post office was caught up in 2014-15. Before that strike, the post office was actually coping to a certain degree. And then it had its challenges. Mark Barnes came around 16-17 to 18-19, given this money. We have got nothing to report home about what he did.
Welcome back live tonight. Still with us, Communications Minister Mondli Gungubele, and we're talking about the revival of the post office, or as he puts it, a brilliant plan of the post office of tomorrow. So, Minister, when you were saying earlier on that the Post Bank will now be operating as a separate entity, I suppose you are meaning in terms of its management, right? It would still be, I suppose, residing in the infrastructure that you already have in place, the many buildings that you have around the country, which are the post office.
The Post Bank, once we finalize the bill that separates it completely from the post office, is going to be provided and incorporated in line with the bank law. In other words, fall completely under the auspices of the Reserve Bank, the Prudential Authority, and the fiscal regulatory institution, so that it accounts like other banks. It is not at that stage now.
And what would that mean like? It would mean we will have new buildings that will be built called Post Bank.
Well, that will be decided by the management as it deems fit. The most important thing now is that we need to have minimum requirements to qualify as as a bank, and then meet the requirements of the Prudential Authority, and also meet the fiscal requirement and the bank included, so that we are actually legislated as a legal bank. So in terms of those details of the buildings and other things, that would be in the purview of the management that will be leading at any given point in time, depending on when do we finalize that.
All right. Let's talk about what you said to one of my colleagues in the earlier parts of your administration. You said the institution's legacies would need to be dealt with if the post office was to be turned around. What are those legacies?
I'm not sure if I hear what you're asking now.
If the post office was to be turned around, you said the institution's legacies would need to be dealt with. What are the old legacies that are within the system of the post office that need to be dealt with?
I'm saying we are saying the post office has to be run in the modern way for it to be able to compete. It has always been run in the old way. Not digitized and not online, and the logistics not actually organized in a manner competitive. All those issues now. The current strategy of the post office of tomorrow is actually looking into a differently run institution, which is actually in terms of the digital capabilities with all the accompanying technologies. Yeah. So one of the things, by the way, is to improve management. As we said, that the post office is not where it is purely because of the staff cost. It is also where it is because there was some leadership.
That's where I was coming. I wanted you to say that. That's exactly why I was asking you. Where you saying with that statement that there are people in the executive that would need to be removed?
No, I said we are looking at we are looking very close, Tabo. How did we get here? And looking at all aspects. That includes the staff cost. How did we employ people, the type of employment we made, whether people qualified, whether people had skills, whether even top management, everyone else did what he was supposed to do, the due diligence and all those kind of things, governance in general. So once we have a full understanding on how we got here, and the business rescue also assist us to find an acceptable way that will render the post office sustainable, we will be able to look at everything, not just the infrastructure, not just anything else. We'll look at everything, even the kind of skills that are actually employed by the post office going forward.
But you do understand that, for example, if you look at places like Silicon Valley and the staff component of what makes companies like Amazon and Google and so forth and so on. I once spoke to the CEO of the post office, and she mentioned this issue of e-commerce being the future of the post office. You need younger minds. So the skills that you're looking for are not going to be sitting in the older generation. You would need younger people coming into that space to certainly move the post office into a modern era.
Quite clearly, the digital economy, which is the economy of the future, is mainly the economy of young people. There's no question about that. But we are also very careful, Thabo, because you might have heard when you speak about climate change, we speak about leaving no one behind. In other words, we want to make sure that in skills uplifting, the people who are trainable to be part of the future of post office are given those opportunities. So we are going to do our best not to allow transition to actually go concomitantly with people losing jobs. We want to minimize that to the best of our ability.
What is the given time frame for the post office to get back to profitability in terms of what you will be presenting to the court, I suppose, when you answer those three questions?
Remember, the prayer we're putting before court is to put all the answers to the three questions I've explained. And then once the court is satisfied and courts hopefully granting us a business rescue route, the business rescue appointed will actually assist and lead the process of assisting the post office to be reorganized, to be the post office that can compete in the modern era. And once that is done, it is then at that point that targets of when are we going to be profitable are going to come once the business rescue completes the job. But the process of this exploration and examination and assistance by the business rescue, many people say it takes a minimum of 12 months. It could be less if it's a miracle. But it's only after that when the viable approach that is believed to be the one that can carry the post office forward in a sustainable way, then those targets you speak about can be spoken about at that stage.
Minister, I appreciate your time. Thank you very much for coming on and ironing out some of these issues here. That is Communications Minister there, Mondli Gungubele.